And with me today, I have Erika Shershun, who is a licensed psychotherapist, course provider, and the author of Healing Sexual Trauma, a workbook for survivors, as well as the recently released Healing Sexual Trauma Guided Journal. So, with decades of clinical experience and deep training in somatic psychology, EMDR, polyvagal theory, and energy modalities, Erika empowers survivors to gently reconnect with their bodies, process trauma safely, and reclaim a sense of wholeness. Her compassionate integrative approach weaves together evidence-based practices like parts work, self-compassion, and nervous system regulation, making healing more accessible and embodied. Erika is also a sought-after clinical trainer, teaching other professionals how to support trauma survivors effectively and sensitively. So, welcome to the show, Erika. Such an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Anu. It's such an honor to be here. Happy to get this opportunity to speak with your listeners.
I'm really, really excited to dive in because you have the work that you're doing, it's just phenomenal. And I absolutely love some of the evidence-based practices that you currently provide. I think the big one for me that stands out is parts work. I'm a big fan of parts work. And yeah, I can't wait for you to talk more about these approaches. But first of all, what inspired you to specialize in sexual trauma recovery?
Well, my own history, to be honest, is what inspired me. So I started my healing journey in my late 20s, um, when I was able to start therapy. And I certainly thought about it before then, but it was just out of reach financially for me. And I didn't know about some of the alternatives with low fee clinics at universities, that sort of thing. So, so when I could finally go, I had no idea I'd be starting a years long search for healing. And I did have other traumas from my childhood, as well as sexual trauma from early adulthood. And then I later found out from very early childhood as well. Um, but I ended up going to therapy, talk therapy, with a few different therapists over 17 years. And and at 17 years, I had this experience of I was in a training for a type of body work called trigger point therapy. And the instructor asked me to volunteer to work on my neck. And my first impulse was to say yes, because he's an excellent practitioner and I wanted to receive the healing work he was about to give. But no came out of my mouth. And someone else stepped up and he worked on his neck, and this person had a similar life-threatening assault to his neck. So when we went back to our tables to practice with our partners, I, had earlier been working on my partner and feeling these minute, tiny pieces of blockage. And I went back to work and my hands went numb. I could not feel anything. And I called the instructor over and he said, he recognized that what was happening, and he said, I think you should take a break and go sit in the other room. And I just got flooded with flashbacks. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was heavily dissociated and having flashbacks. And that was the first time I realized the extent that the sexual traumas were impacting my life, like every area of my life, and how connected the body is to trauma. So, there's still to this day therapists and neuroscientists who don't agree that memory is stored in the body, but my body was responding to things that I hadn't was not thinking about with my brain at the time. And the best way I can think of talking about that is to say that those are fragments of memory that are coming up that are stored in the body. So um, yeah, that brought me to learning about somatic psychotherapy and then deciding to go to grad school to learn more about it, where my healing continued. I, you know, was now seeking body-based healing, and I still wasn't getting what I wanted from a therapist, which was if you could do these things and it will help and you will start to see symptom reduction. And that's how my workbook came about because I've found those things on my own by taking from a number of different modalities. Not a lot of them were not things I was learning in grad school, and some of them were. And combining those things, and that's how I healed. And that's how I ended up putting the workbook together after a lot of clients started finding their way to me who were also survivors. So I had, done all of these practices with them as well. So I knew it wasn't just me that this worked for.
Amazing. What a journey. Wow. And so in terms of, your own healing journey and how it shaped you currently, what do you think is so important to include in your practice now when you actually do help other people?
Well, it's complex work, so there's a lot to include. It's not an easy answer. I think one of the most important things, though, to include is grounding and orientation to start out with that and helping create a sense of safety or relative safety for the survivor. It's hard to do the work without that. And that can, for some people, take longer than for others to begin to connect with that. But usually see very fast results with that. Um, and it's actually the first chapter of the workbook is about that. And it ends with a practice that I teach all of my clients. And I offer the first chapter of the workbook for free on my website, one of my two websites, and that's the healingsexualtrauma.com website. So your listeners are welcome to download that and check out that practice. The piece of it that's really important is orientation.
Mm.
And I teach it in a specific way in the practice, but it can be done really just letting your eyes fall on whatever they're drawn to in the environment around you. And it's so important. Are you familiar with it?
That's yeah, I know that one.
So you might want to say more about it, but I'll just quickly say it's really important because our brain is always scanning our environment, wanting to know that there's no danger, there's no present moment danger.
Mm.
And when we are triggered, we tend to, or act like dysregulated. We tend to be very consumed with our own thoughts and sensations and emotions, and we tend to not automatically do that scanning.
Mm.
And so our brain is not distinguishing a thought of fear from an actual threat.
Mm.
And a lot of times clients, when I tell them about this, they don't recognize at first that fear is present,
Yeah.
but under almost all anxiety, fear is present. So if you go deep enough with the feelings that are coming up, you can usually distill it down to fear.
Mm.
And in orientation, you're helping your brain and your mind, your whole system take in that there is no present danger. I can relax. That was just a thought, and I can now relax. And it's the most effective thing I know of to take someone out of dysregulation
Yeah.
and toward a calm state.
Yeah, definitely. Because, when we're in that trauma state, we're just so stuck in our head. And so, just what's going on around us in this present moment, we're not even aware, are we? But I mean, many people suffer from dissociation, or I know in my case, I was constantly in that fight, flight, or freeze response, just so much anxiety that I was just
Mhm.
stuck in the past or worrying about the future that the present moment didn't even exist. So absolutely, just having that awareness on an object that, might be there, or just, looking at something, or even, I think, even because obviously you do a lot of somatic work, don't you? But even just having that touch of a wall or a chair that you sat on, it just helps you to bring you back. And that's not easy, is it? It's not an easy feat.
Yeah, if early on it's not. It gets easier and easier the more you do it, and more second nature, where you don't have to think of it. The more and more you do it until you really need it.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, survivors are going to um, be consumed with what's happening inside their body because it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you're like, what's going on? I was like, why am I in this place? This doesn't feel good. What can I, so it makes sense that um that as a survivor who doesn't have the traumas integrated yet, this would be needed.
Definitely. And so, I know that, I love talking about somatic work, but you do include the body as well as the mind, right, in trauma healing. So in your kind of, the way that you do your work, how does somatic psychology support survivors differently than talk therapy alone?
Well, going back to what I said earlier about trauma being stored in the body, the brain processes an overwhelming moment, which is what trauma is, overwhelm to the whole system. Or I'm studying with someone who had a course called Organic Intelligence, and he views it as a lack of resources. So you can see it either way, a lack of resources for what's happening in that moment.
Mm,
Um, so, so because the brain processes a traumatic event differently than a regular, just a happy moment, um, it's encoding it in a different way. So regular memories are encoded explicitly, and so it'll play back like a movie,
mm,
and or it's like a list, like these are things I have to do today.
mm,
Then there's implicit memories, and there's two types of implicit memories. There's emotional and procedural. So when that overwhelm happens during what we will later call a traumatic event,
mm,
we are encoding the memory implicitly, emotionally, and procedurally. Procedural is the somatic piece of it largely.
mm,
It's sensation and movement, that sort of thing, patterns of movement, um, gestures, all of that. So, um, given that, the way I view it is when you haven't been able to integrate the trauma, it's kind of like landmines all over your system, and
mm,
anything related to the trauma or traumas, and which is very common in um, our work, is that people come in with who've had many traumas.
mm,
Um, So anything related to each one of those can then set off that landmine. So that's what we call a trigger, right? Or we dissociate, or we have a flashback, or any combination of that. Until all of those fragments of memory, trauma memory, are integrated in the system, that will continue to happen. And it can also happen like it did for me, where it suddenly gets worse
Wow.
20, 30 years later. And I see a lot of people that way as well, because they pushed it away for uh, sometimes it's a very wise thing their body did to push it away because they didn't have the internal and or external resources they needed to heal it at the time.
Mm,
You know, like they had to get through school. They had to get through, you know, raising a young child. Um, and it gets pushed away.
mm,
And at a certain point, the body will, the way again that I view it as the body will scream like it's time to do this work.
mm,
And I'm going to give you one symptom after another until you start doing this work, until you listen, right? And when it happens, it doesn't feel like it's time to do this work because you're overwhelmed with the symptoms that start to show up.
mm,
So I think though to be able to reframe it to like your body is letting you know this is the time is really helpful.
it is.
And you know, ideally, you don't wait till that point if you can, and like you're able to do some healing work early on, but that's not the case for so many people.
Mm.
So it's never too late to heal it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, thank you. And so, for those unfamiliar, how would you actually describe the polyvagal theory's role in trauma work?
Well, I think it's something that every therapist should go over with their clients because it is so important um, in being able to recognize what state your system's in and then to understand what you can do once you're in it. So we don't get to choose what state our nervous system takes us into.
Mm,
Stephen Porges, who came up with polyvagal theory, he also came up with the word neuroception, which means that your nervous system, in an instant, before you can even have the thought, determines what state you go into. So it's especially important with survivors because so many survivors are angry at themselves for how their body responded,
mm,
and yet they had no control of that.
yeah,
Their system, which is primarily concerned with their survival, decided in an instant what would be their best chance of survival and took them into that state.
mm,
So it can be that you you fought, you fled, you yelled for help, no one came, and then you go into freeze. Or you can immediately go right into freeze. And that's what I see most commonly, especially because um, I think it's 96% of sexual assault is someone known to the survivor. Um, and the betrayal element is so intense, and the shock that someone they thought they could trust is doing this to them. I think it contributes to taking us into a freeze. Also, the fact that the person is usually bigger and stronger
mm,
contributes. So um, it's, you know, if you froze, it's because that was the best thing your system could do to help you to survive that moment. And, you know, that's at the root of a lot of shame that comes up for survivors. And it's so important that they know that it wasn't in their control if they couldn't fight.
Mm.
And had they fought, things might have turned out even worse for them.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, definitely. And so I think that's a really important concept as well, because that's where a lot of people carry self-blame and
Yes,
the shame that comes with that as well. So I think that's really important for them to understand that, whatever happened, the response was survival at the time. It was a survival
exactly.
mechanism. Mm.
Exactly. And I've experienced there's also the fawn response,
Yeah.
the please and appease. And I've experienced all of them in different situations. So any can happen. And because there's this belief out there that where a lot of people are afraid because they froze once, they'll always freeze if anything else happens in their future.
Mm.
And hopefully they'll never have to find out. But it's important they know that, again, their system's going to choose the one that's most likely to help them survive. So that's why, in one instance, my system had me fight like hell.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, and actually, in that one case, I did not get raped. So he kind of suddenly gave up, or I don't know what happened. Divine intervention. I don't know what exactly happened, but all of a sudden he got up because it was a stranger, and I was out running,
Mm.
and suddenly he got up and looked, just I was still where he'd thrown me, and he ran away. But
Right.
I'd been fighting to survive because I couldn't, you know,
Mm.
I mean, sorry if I don't want to be triggering for anyone,
I
but
understand. Yeah. Okay. Oh, thank you for sharing that. God, that's horrendous. How long ago was that?
it was years ago. That was what set off the neck piece in that demo when my hands went numb, um, and then I started having the flashbacks. That it was from that specifically, but then that tied into some other things. So it was over 30 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, amazing that, that obviously that happened. And I'm really, glad that you've obviously moved on from that now. And, you've healed and now you're here to obviously help others as well. So, yeah, let's talk about, the work that you're doing as well in like the parts work. I absolutely love parts work. So how do you actually integrate that within all the other modalities that you specialize in, like the EMDR and the energy modalities as well?
Yeah, so when I see people individually, I use EMDR quite a bit,
Okay.
but I bring in somatic work with the EMDR and parts work with the EMDR, and releasing trapped emotions as well. But in the guided journal, which is this, I have a segment that moves from self-compassion into parts as an introduction into parts work. So I will combine it that way as well. So it's very much of the moment, what's present in the moment when I bring it in.
Mm.
Sometimes it's very clear it's needed in that moment.
Okay.
So that's how I work.
Mm.
And that's uh, how it comes into the EMDR when I'm really noticing
Mm.
that the person would benefit from it. And
Mm.
then I also do a modality called compassion key
Mm.
and bring it in that way.
Amazing, yeah. And again, for those who don't understand what parts work is, how would you explain it in your own terms?
Well, we all have different aspects of ourselves that show up at different times. So someone might have like a heavy performer part that often can come along with the fawn and the please and appease.
Mm.
Um, and which is which is a survival strategy that is separate from polyvagal, which has the fight, flight, and freeze
Mm.
states. Um, but the fawn is believed to originate in the midbrain, and it's a survival strategy that um, says, if I'm pleasant, they're less likely to hurt me, and it can help people get through a really tough childhood. But it can come on as an adult too. And so, um, sorry, I lost the train of thought. What was your question for?
Yeah, just about parts work. Yeah, what that consists of.
Um, so there was a reason. Oh, so I was saying that um, so they might, a person might have a strong performer part
Mhm.
to entertain people, right?
Mhm.
And that might feel very uncomfortable to them because whenever they're in social situations, they feel like they always have to be on, always be the entertainer and taking care of everybody, and they never get a break in a sense. So we might want to work with that part so that they can begin to relax it and choose when they want to have that part show up.
Okay.
And part of parts work is that you you'll come to realize that the parts that you tend to judge or have trouble with um, tend to be there to protect a more vulnerable part.
Mm.
So we get to know those parts and understand that we're not rejecting any of the parts. We're just working on having more choice, which is similar to like working with the dysregulation, like with dissociation. It's not about taking away dissociation, it's about having choice when you want to dissociate a bit and when you don't, right? So a lot of the work we do is around choice, which is the opposite of um, being victimized, where choice is taken away from you.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, fantastic way of explaining that. Again, thank you. So, what are some gentle ways for survivors right now to begin feeling safe in their bodies again?
So again, I would go back to the practice I was talking about earlier, and to to try that.
Hmm.
And it starts out with just feeling your feet on the floor, and um, there's more to it than that. But for now, I'll just say that, and then I bring in the orienting, which in the practice, I do it in a specific way where you turn your head to one side all the way and then very, very slowly scan the room to the other side and then back again. Yeah. And back to center slowly. So you go to one side, then the other, and then back to the side you started on, and then to center. Just to give your nervous system a lot of time to take it in. And it's not a thought, it's, very much experiential that your nervous system takes in. There's actually no threat here. And that will change people's state. So it might not get them to a completely calm state immediately, but it will definitely take them in that direction. So they will feel an improvement. And then there's a couple other parts to that. And the practice, I call it coming into safety or coming into presence. So safety is too much of a leap for some people to use that word. So in that case, just coming into presence. And um, I developed that from my own experience of healing and noticing that every time I would get triggered or have a flashback, if I was around other people, they would tell me just breathe. And that never helped me. In fact, it made me feel worse because I would be struggling to breathe. My neck would be constricting. And that was part of what was so terrifying about it was I'd be struggling to breathe at all. And I see this with a lot of survivors. And so I never start with breath. I bring it in after the orientation, but I never start with that.
Okay, yeah. And it is, I've heard about these crisis lines where, if somebody's suicidal, they're told to have a glass of water and to take some deep breaths. So it just makes you think if that's really going to be an effective strategy. Mm,
I don't think it is to start with. I
mm,
think it's great to bring in the breath
mm,
after orientation if they're in a regulated enough state. But I don't think starting with breath is a great idea. I know a lot of people do it, and sometimes it works for some people,
yeah,
but I don't think it's across the board helpful.
yeah, thank you. And so why did you choose journaling as a central practice in your guided journal?
Because journaling helps with healing in other ways.
Mm,
Um, so I brought it in for that reason. Also, the publisher asked me to do a guided journal.
okay.
But I really think the journal is a gentle way to be introduced to my work.
Mm,
There are a lot of therapists who use my workbook in their work with clients, and there are clients who will bring it in because a lot of therapists don't, as I'm sure you're well aware, a lot of therapists don't have adequate training in trauma, let alone sexual trauma. So that's lacking for many, many therapists.
mm,
So, so they're able to use the book in their sessions, um, and I think that's a great approach. But if someone's doing like being drawn to work on their trauma
mm,
on their own, I would definitely recommend the guided journal for a place to start. It kind of flows from one topic to the next. It feels a little more gentle, a little less I'm going to use overwhelm in the other way here, not
mm,
meaning trauma, but it feels a little less overwhelming to understand what to prioritize and make it very clear in the guided journal what to prioritize.
mm.
And the workbook has more practices. So that is why I say a little less overwhelming,
Yeah.
because, people can get a little confused about what is most important with all the additional practices. But I offer a lot of practices because different things work for different people.
Yep.
And it's really good to try the different practices and find what works best for you and for your system.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. And so, what do you think is one myth about sexual trauma that you wish everyone would stop believing?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. Um, I think what I wish is that people understood the impact of trauma on anyone who's been through trauma of any type.
Mm,
I mean, especially what's called a big T trauma, like sexual trauma. Um, and a big T trauma usually indicates a life threat or witnessing something life threatening or, worse. So, so sexual traumas in that category.
mm,
And I wish that all the systems that survivors have to interact with, I wish they all had an understanding of how trauma impacts people. And, especially for survivors going through who go to the police or go through the court system, there's a total lack of understanding of how it impacts people and like what trauma memory looks like. Like
yeah.
when survivors go to court, they're expected to recall as though it were the same kind of memory as remembering graduation or a birthday, or and that's not how trauma memory works. And then they're shamed for that at times. And so I just, I wish people would get educated in um, basics about trauma and being trauma informed. And, even there's even a lot of people in the medical field that don't have that training. So
Mm.
that's the first thing that comes to mind, but I could probably give you a long list if you had time.
Thank you again. Amazing. So, yeah, I mean, it's been so re wonderful having this chat with you and, going more into the work that you do and the modalities that you specialize in. So, where can my listeners find you and work with you? What's your kind of process around that?
So I have two websites. I have the healingsexualtrauma.com, which has the books and some blog posts and that sort of thing. And I highly recommend my blog post on symptoms
Mm,
because a lot of survivors I work with don't realize a lot of the symptoms they're suffering from are related to the trauma.
okay.
And then my therapist website, which is feltsenseresonance.com, or they could go to my name, which is Erika Shershun therapy.com.
Mm,
So it's, I guess it'll be in your show notes because people aren't going to know how to spell that.
mm.
So, can I give one more answer to your last question?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Sorry, I'm spacing it out. There was something I wanted to say about, oh,
The
I
myths of
lost
sexual
the
trauma.
thought. Yeah, I lost. Oh, yes, I have it.
Mhm.
Okay. So I just wanted to add for your last question that I think another big myth that I read and hear said a lot is that you never heal from sexual trauma. I don't agree with that.
No.
I healed from it, and many of my clients have healed from it. And I think I just need to clarify what I mean by heal, which is that they no longer get triggered by the sexual trauma. They can talk about it without getting dysregulated.
Mm,
Um, and that is a really good feeling. Like they're no longer having symptoms related to it or getting dysregulated by it.
mm,
And to me, that's healing.
yeah.
Um, there's always more growth to do in life. I'm not saying that's not the case, but I just don't agree with this idea that you can't heal from sexual trauma.
Mm,
And I'll just add to that, it's never going to be like a positive memory. You'll always have that in your story, but you'll when you get to the other side of the healing, you'll look at it differently. Um, so healing's definitely possible, and it's never too late to heal.
thank you, thank you. And so, are you available for people to connect with on any social media?
I'm on I'm on Instagram.
Okay.
However, I've been neglecting it a bit. So, um, yeah, I need to get on that. I'm working on my third book, and this one's for practitioners. So that's why I've been neglecting it a bit.
That's okay. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, amazing the work that you're doing. And I shall be dropping in all the links in this episode for people to find out more about you and the work that you do and the books that you provide and the course link as well. So yeah, that's amazing. And everyone, please do get in touch if you have any questions about this show. I am sure Erica would also love to hear from you all. Again, thank you so much, Erica. It's been such an honor having you on today. I hope you enjoyed talking as well.
So much. I really enjoy your podcast. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Thanks.
you so much. Amazing. So, yeah, that's all we have time for today, my beautiful people. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next show. Stay blessed, my friends.